I'm telling you, young man, I'm so proud of you. It isn't every man who can have a nephew who's a top agent with ICM, FBA, CIA.
Excuse me? Top agent with the CIA? When did this happen, pal?
Well, you mean when did I tell him? Well, obviously I, had to let him in on our little secret, all the intense training and Giuseppe Franco, the searching and trials in the teen Americas trying to get them off drugs and the undercover spy rings, and you know what I'm talking about.
We're a long way from Chevy Chase's vacation movies. We've got a long-forgotten movie from the two Coreys that we'll somehow compare to a Christopher Nolan film, but probably not in the way that you think. We're still up all night, and this episode we watched National Lampoon's Last Resort.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to USA Up All Night with me, Rhonda.
Hi, I'm Gilbert Godfrey, the comedian in the cupboard, for USA Up All Night.
In this movie, you'll see two of your favorite stars. Now, if you drink enough beer, you'll start seeing more of your favorite stars.
Stay with me on USA Up All Night.
Welcome to Still Up All Night, your source for all things USA Up All Night. I'm Travis Yates, joined as always by my co-host, Rob Cady. Rob, welcome back in to the Still Up All Night studio. How are you?
I'm well, thanks, Travis. Good to see you again.
This week, we've got quite a find, perhaps the most forgotten title in the two Coreys' filmography. Of course, I'm talking about 1980s icons Corey Haim and Corey Feldman, and the movie is National Lampoon's Last Resort. Rob, did you have any idea before this episode that the two Coreys did a National Lampoon movie?
So I'd heard of the title of the movie, but did not know it was a two Coreys film. And it was one I'd never seen. Those National Lampoons started strong, I feel like, but then turned into a hit and miss parade.
Before we get to the movie, let's take a pop culture rewind and take a look at what was cracking when the Last Resort movie came out in April of '94. The top movies at the box office. Any guess, Rob, at the top box office hit at this time?
Oh, no. 94?
D2, The Mighty Ducks. In second place, another sports sequel, Major League 2. Rounding out the top five is The Paper, 4 Weddings and a Funeral, and Naked Gun, 33 1/3, The Final Insult. So 4 out of 5 comedies in the top 5, showing that we were still laughing back in the 90s.
Comedies? That's not today by any stretch of the imagination. And love to see Naked Gun in there. Love those films.
Yeah. Songs topping the charts in April of '94, and my how things change in just a decade. Last episode, we had a very poppy top of the charts with Michael Jackson, Hall & Oates, Paul McCartney, all topping the charts. In April of '94, R. Kelly's Bump and Grind.
Whew, a personal favorite.
A very eclectic mix rounds out the top 5. The Sign by Ace of Base. Without You, Never Forget You by Mariah Carey, by Crash Test Dummies, and Celine Dion's The Power of Love were the top songs of the time. Seeing the Crash Test Dummies really took me back. Rob, any thoughts on the top 5 songs of April of '94?
I had forgotten about the Crash Test Dummies entirely until just now.
Your top TV shows were Seinfeld, 60 Minutes, Home Improvement, Roseanne, and Murder, She Wrote. Impressively, Rob, last episode, our Pop Culture Rewind was 1983, and 60 Minutes was the top-rated show on TV. 11 years later, still holding strong at number 2.
How the mighty have fallen.
And the dying days of the golden era of the sitcom here, Seinfeld and Roseanne especially, which made a huge impact on the television landscape to this day, really, with the revival of Roseanne, of course, now dubbed The Connors. A few other pop culture notes. The Dallas Cowboys were just a couple of months off their second consecutive Super Bowl win, beating the Buffalo Bills 30-13. That marked the second year in a row that the Cowboys beat those very unlucky Bills. The loss marked 4 straight Super Bowl losses for them. What was Rhonda Shear up to? She was coming off a 1983 appearance in the B-movie Return of the Rollerball 7, playing Officer Daryl Skates. Get it, Rob? Rollerball, Daryl Skates. She also appeared in an episode of USA's original series, Silk Stockings, so some cross-promotion there for USA. And she starred in the straight-to-video action comedy Tender Loving Care. Rob, any memory of Tender Loving Care?
No.
The movie would appear on USA Up All Night in April of 1995. It's the only appearance on Up All Night, so Rhonda taking advantage of her pull there to get some additional airtime for her movie. So that's what was going on in April of 1994 in pop culture. Now let's dial in on one weird little movie, National Lampoon's Last Resort. Before we get to the movie itself, Rob, I feel like we need to break down some of the key parts of the movie itself first. One being National Lampoon, and the other the pop culture phenomenon that was known simply as the Two Coreys. National Lampoon was a humor magazine that ran from 1970 until 1998. It was a spin-off of the Harvard Lampoon, a college publication that had been around since the late 1800s. National Lampoon got into the movie business after characters from their magazine inspired feature-length movies, including the first one, Disco Beaver from Outer Space, which was made specifically for HBO. They were put on the map in 1978 with National Lampoon's Animal House. Rob, Animal House was the Blair Witch of comedies. It was a low-budget film that went on to become one of the highest-grossing comedies of all time. They hit gold again in 1983 with National Lampoon's Vacation, starring Chevy Chase. That film, of course, spawned an entire franchise that is still sort of going today with 2015's Vacation. One might argue that the last great National Lampoon film was 1989 with Christmas Vacation.
It's just such a weird, I don't know what it even brand, because like I feel like, you know, you take like Animal House, for example, and it's not really synonymous with National Lampoon's, where I feel like the Vacation series, you know them as National Lampoon's Vacation. So, and I feel like, you know, when you get later, like Van Wilder, I would guarantee most people have no idea it's, you know, a Lampoon movie. And I think there's a whole number of them that are that way. So for like, in terms of branding, just a strange brand when it's not like the strong suit. You know, you're not, some of your most popular movies aren't associated with that brand.
By the 1990s, most of their movies were straight to video, though there were a few highlights like 1995's Senior Trip, which marked Jeremy Renner's film debut, and Van Wilder in 2002. And since the early 2000s, they've been mostly straight-to-video streaming schlock. But here's the thing, Rob. National Lampoon wasn't in the filmmaking business. They weren't producing these movies. They were simply a name that studios paid to slap on the front of the film. So if you ask yourself, how did the makers of Animal House and the Vacation franchise go to National Lampoon's Frat Chance and Cheerleaders Must Die? That's how. A once gold label in their early years has become more of what we're used to here at Still Up All Night, B-movie goodness, and we love that too. Rob, any favorite National Lampoon movie?
It's got to be Vacation for me, I think.
The original?
Yeah, the original. There's just so much to this day that I still quote from that and you know, reminisce about. Although Christmas has got to be a you know, neck and neck, probably, maybe tied.
Now on to a topic near and dear to my heart, the two Coreys. Both Corey Haim and Corey Feldman were child stars. Haim made his debut starring alongside Terry Garr and Peter Weller in the 1984 movie Firstborn. And he followed that up with the adaptation of Stephen King's Silver Bullet in 1985 and shot to fame as a plucky 14-year-old in the coming-of-age dramedy Lucas. And that film also starred Charlie Sheen, Winona Ryder, Courtney Thorne-Smith, and Cary Green. So at an early age, Haim was holding his own with some big established name in Hollywood.
Yeah, a strong start. Just good stories. I think most of those movies largely still hold up as well.
Corey Feldman started a little smaller, literally. He was just 3 when he first appeared in a McDonald's commercial, and then in 1978 he advanced to some TV series and made-for-TV movies, including 2 episodes of Mork and Mindy, so a shout-out to some of our older listeners who remember that. You might argue that his big break came in 1984 with, and Rob, I know you know this as our resident horror expert, Friday the 13th, The Final Chapter. He was also in Gremlins that same year and followed that up as Mouth in The Goonies, arguably his most memorable role. He flexed his acting chops in 1986 in Stand By Me, also a Stephen King adaptation. Now that led to the first pairing of Corey Haim and Corey Feldman in the comedy horror classic The Lost Boys. Despite also starring Jason Patric, Diane Wiest, Kiefer Sutherland, and Jamie Gertz, the 2 Coreys were the star of the film.
That's an all-time favorite of mine. Just still holds up. Just great performances across the board. I think elevated some people to stardom, and just a fun, more comedy than horror, but I think it's a good gateway horror movie for a lot of people.
It was also the beginning of a pop culture brand. The 2 actors sort of melded into one, known just as the 2 Coreys. The 2 friends would star in 7 feature-length films in the next 9 years. And they had a couple of other projects as well, including 2 seasons of the 2 Coreys reality show on A&E. Despite their popularity in the late 80s, Rob, they only starred in 2 successful films together after The Lost Boys, 1988's License to Drive and 1989's Dream a Little Dream. And from there, it was straight to video life for both of them, which, as popular as they were, that's hard to believe. Just 3 big hits. Rob, you might have been a bit too old to fanboy out the way I did over the Corey movies. Were you a fan of either or both?
First, I'm offended by that ageism.
Oh.
I was a fan. Lost Boys was, obviously had seen them independently in some of those other films, but really enjoyed their chemistry in Lost Boys, and then followed up with License to Drive and Dream a Little Dream, as you said, and that Dream a Little Dream to this day, for some reason, stands out to me as just a strange, quirky little movie that
love it.
Was very much carried by them, and I think in most other people at the time's hands, that would have been a train wreck, and they made that work. And so I was a fan, and with the A&E thing, tuned in when I could to that to see what was happening with them, and was hoping for something to come of it, another movie that brought them back into the limelight.
One final note, as much as I hate to say it, and I know drug use as well as sexual abuse that has been cited by Corey Feldman for what contributed to the pair's quick fall from grace in Hollywood. Boy, it seems like both of these young actors were on a strong upward trajectory before being paired together. And do you think that putting them together was possibly the worst thing for them? I mean, both had some acting range, especially Haim, in my opinion. But once the 2 Coreys was born, it was just straight comedy mostly that just got worse, seemingly, with each movie.
They're now that you posit that it feels like there's something to it. I mean, an example is the movie we're about to discuss, where I don't know it, and I don't know how to properly phrase it, but it's almost like they're playing off each other too much as opposed to trying to make a solid movie. There was just something about those later performances when they're together that are just different when they're away from each other. That there very well could be something to that.
So that leads us to today's movie, just the 4th film from the 2 Coreys, and probably the least known of their filmography, even with the National Lampoon moniker attached to it. let's dive in to Last Resort. Now, as I mentioned, Last Resort was a straight-to-video release. It washed ashore on April 29th, 1994. Both Haim and Feldman received top billing, and it stars a really interesting mix of supporting actors, most notably Jeffrey Lewis, a longtime character actor, one of the ultimate, that guy who was in That Thing actors, who's been in everything, from Every Which Way But Loose to The Devil's Rejects. And sadly, what I just now learned in doing research for this episode, he passed away in 2015.
No, just he's fun in everything he's in,
Yeah.
and while I can't say this role was a good one, he appeared to have fun with it.
It also starred longtime soap opera actor Robert Mandan, who might mostly be remembered as Chester on the satirical sitcom Soap.
Yes, that's right.
And then we have our love interests. The first is Alex, played by former model and Italian TV star Demetra Hampton. The second is Sonia, played by one of Hollywood's most curious cases, Maureen Flanagan. Now, Flanagan is probably best known for playing Evie Garland, the half-alien who could stop time on the syndicated sitcom Out of This World. And you might also know her from a 22-episode run on Season 4 of the WB drama Seventh Heaven. Now, I call her a curious case because I always thought she'd be a bigger star, but it just never happened. I mean, she has the look, she's a gorgeous blonde, always energetic on screen. She started the way a lot of other young actors do in TV. She had exposure on a fairly popular show with Out of This World. Popular enough that, Rob, if you put your fingers together to stop time, most Gen Xers will know exactly what you're doing. In 1993, she was in a snarky comedy alongside an up-and-coming Scott Wolf, Teenage Bonnie and Klepto Clyde, which totally fit with the slacker sentiment of the early 90s. And yet, her career has mostly been TV and smaller movies. Rob, do you remember Maureen Flanagan from Out of This World or other things that she's been in?
Yeah, absolutely. But mostly from Out of This World. And yeah, I think that's on point too. With she just seemed like someone, as time moved on, I should be seeing in more things and just never did.
A couple of other casting notes: a super odd appearance by Zelda Rubinstein, the 4'3" actress with the squeaky voice best known as Tangina from Poltergeist. Also, Roger Clinton, Bill Clinton's brother, is in this movie. Now keep in mind, the President of the United States at the time this movie was made was Bill Clinton. And during that period, his brother was busy filming scenes in National Lampoon's Resort.
That's great. What a great little nugget of trivia for you.
One of the things that makes this movie so curious is how it barely exists. Like, if it weren't for Up All Night or the DVD copy that I own, and I'll explain that later, I don't think anyone in the world would know about this film. I mean,
it's one of the films now that is not available on any streaming service. Yeah, it just is definitely a forgotten film.
Even for a Two Corys movie, there's nothing online about it. I mean, hardly any of our fellow B-movie lovers out there have written about it, except for one. I did find one website called Forgotten Films. It's a website from Todd, a movie-loving puppeteer from Colorado. I'm not making that up. Look it up. In 2018, he wrote about this lost gem, calling it a half-hearted attempt at the slobs versus snobs formula.
A little bit, maybe.
As I noted earlier, Todd agrees with me, saying that Maureen Flanagan brings a much-needed spark to the cast. Unfortunately, Todd doesn't seem to know much more about the origins of the film, offering only his unabashed opinion, and he is not a fan. What we do know about the film, it was originally titled Scuba School before being released as Last Resort, and there was an article about the film in Entertainment Weekly after its release.
Oh, wow.
This is what Glenn Kenny thought of the movie. He wrote, National Lampoon's Last Resort hits rock bottom in a way the magazine's founders surely never contemplated. Not only is this mutation mind-bogglingly inept, and bland, it's also inexcusably unfunny.
Whew. Yeah.
Ouch. And while I couldn't find a budget for the movie, Entertainment Weekly says it looks like it was made for $20.
I came up with very little, if less than you did. Like I said, I couldn't find even any speculation about a budget, let alone any sort of box office returns.
Seriously, Rob, I cannot overstate how much Kenny hated this movie. He goes on to write, Last Resort can only be compared to one of the lower circles of Dante's hell.
Wow.
It was written by Patrick Laberteau, who plays Kevin in the 1987 comedy Summer School, and Damian Lee, who was a producer of some Skinamax films and nothing else I really recognized. I can't imagine the substance that they were on while writing this movie, Rob. Last Resort was directed by Raphael Zelinsky, a veteran indie director who got his start with the 1983 sex comedy Screwballs. And he has plenty of B-movies and TV series on his resume since then. Rob, anything in Zelinsky's filmography that stood out to you?
Screwballs was the big one that jumped out at me.
Last Resort first appeared on USA Up All Night on July 15th, 1994. So just after its DVD release, or technically at the time, I suppose, VHS release. It was the first movie of the night, followed by Ski School and Chopper Chicks in Zombie Town. Of course, we covered Chopper Chicks in episode 17 of Still Up All Night. Last Resort would air 9 more times between then and February 16th, 1998, when it aired alongside Hunk, our movie, for episode 15. So some fateful pairings here for Last Resort. Rob, it's one of these later Up All Night episodes that I caught it. And by the late 1990s, I wasn't really watching as religiously as I did when I was younger, but I do remember catching this movie while in college. I caught it midway through the movie, so if you're wondering how I ended up with a DVD copy of this movie, that's why. When I stumbled across this rare Two Coreys movie that also starred Maureen Flanagan, I had to see the entire thing. Was it money well spent? Well, let's try to break down the plot of what Entertainment Weekly compared to a lower circle of Dante's hell. Rob, we'll do our best to break the plot of this movie down, but it is difficult. It's probably best to gloss over a lot of it, because if we get granular, we'll get so far into the weeds, we might never come out. It would be like the Matrix in here. No one would ever see us again. We would just be in the simulation talking about this movie forever.
Man, you just made a direct connection to this movie with the cyberpunk aspect.
So we meet Sam, played by Corey Feldman, and Dave, played by Corey Haim. They're two 20-somethings living in Detroit and working in a fast food restaurant. In an unfunny skit, they cause an accident that burns the restaurant down, leaving them out of work. And Dave keeps telling Sam they need cash, like he repeats it over and over, but he never explains why they're so hard up for money. We see them back in their apartment, which is comprised of cardboard walls with the windows painted on. At first, it looks like the two are on the phone from separate locations, and then what is supposed to be a funny gag, they both sit down on the same couch, with the couch and the walls just painted on in different colors, so the apartment is sort of split in two with contrasting designs, one side purple, one side pink.
The old sitcom trope of, piece of tape down the middle and my half, your half.
It should be noted that while even at work at the fast food restaurant here, Corey Feldman is dressed in a suit and hat. It's his Michael Jackson garb that now is so familiar. Rob, I don't know how much you've followed Feldman through the years, but somewhere along the line, he befriended Michael Jackson, and he decided to mimic Jackson's style, like all the way, to the point that now, at this point, he's appearing in movies looking like him, or at least dressed like him.
And often dances like him.
Yes.
in the same movie.
Somewhere between License to Drive and Dream a Little Dream, the obsession started. In Dream a Little Dream, he's dressed like MJ and has an entire dance routine in the film where he dances just like Jackson, quite impressively, I have to say, to a poppy version of Dream a Little Dream of Me. Now, I get that Michael Jackson was the most famous guy on the planet at the time, but it has been so weird to see Feldman create his entire identity around him.
Yeah, I saw him on a short clip on a podcast recently, and unfortunately, it was a very sad clip where he was discussing the number of friends that he's lost, and how sort of shocking that is at his age that over, I think he said 70% of his friends are gone. But yeah, there he is in a Michael Jackson style suit.
While at the apartment, we learn that Sam's uncle, Rex Carver, played by Jeffrey Lewis, was an actor during the classical Hollywood era, playing Captain Morgan, a swashbuckling buccaneer. But then we cut to Carver, who's on a resort island, Treasure Island, watching some of his classic films on a projector. But then the actor that's played the antagonist in all of Rex Carver's films, known as Hemlock, and this is Robert Mandan, he bursts into Carver's office. He gives a hilarious monologue about always playing the bad guy, Babcock, in Carver's movies, while Carver, as Captain Morgan, got all the good parts, the good women, and the good venereal diseases, I think he said. So Carver is behind on his mortgage payments on the resort, and Hemlock has bought a controlling interest in the bank. Hemlock demands payment or he'll take over the island. However, for reasons never explained, Hemlock is wearing a voice-changing device, so he sounds kind of like a robot. Rob, what did you make of Hemlock's voice changer in this movie?
A screeching robot, maybe? Such a weird and bad choice, because I had oftentimes significant difficulty understanding what he was saying because of the pitch modulating they were doing with it. And sometimes I feel like he had some of the better lines in the film, and they get totally lost on you.
I don't know if it was an issue with the DVD, but the movie is plagued with sound issues too, so Hemlock's voice changer didn't help matters when it came to hearing the dialogue. I do have to admit, I actually like this premise of two old classical Hollywood era screen rivals renewing their grievances in real life years later.
For the sort of 80s style comedy.
Yeah.
I mean, you've got a good foundation.
But when you throw in the just absolute bollocks that this film has, the cool premise is completely lost. But okay, so this is our inciting incident. The battle for control of Treasure Island, and life imitates art as two old movie foes do battle again, but this time for real. We cut back to Detroit, where Sam and Dave have been evicted from their apartment, and when going through their mail, Sam finds a letter from Uncle Rex asking the boys to come down to Treasure Island to be scuba instructors. And a homeless woman gives Sam a bottle of something, and he's like, oh, it's one of those things. And he tosses it on the ground, and boom, we cut to the beach, and Sam and Dave have been magically transported to the island.
One of these things, and then it's a magic artifact to transport them? Like, what?
So thank goodness this is where we meet Maureen Flanagan's character, Sonia. She introduces herself to the guys as Earth servant to the island Amazon goddess Yaya and Uncle Rex's paid slave. Dave and Sonia are instantly attracted to each other, and Feldman breaks the fourth wall by saying, "This scene is making me sick. Can you turn the music down, please?" But he's speaking, of course, of the non-diegetic music that's in the soundtrack heard by the audience and not coming from in the movie. I like the clever fourth wall break there by Feldman.
Oddly, there's quite a bit of fourth wall breaking in the film.
And Rob, this is followed by another clever scene. The sound effect of an airplane landing is heard while a hand pushing a little toy airplane down a runway on the beach, and then it's indicating that guests are landing on the island, and then a full-size bus pulls up in the background, dropping off those passengers. So whether done for comic purposes or budgetary issues, probably a combination of both, there are a few times when the gags in this movie hit, and I thought that was definitely one of them.
That one, yeah, I agree. That one slightly worked relative to the rest.
But I think that here is where we really get off track, when Sonia brings Sam and Dave to Rex's office. It was that opening clip from the show. It seems like Rex is suffering from dementia. He doesn't remember Sam, even though he sent him a letter inviting him to the resort to be a scuba instructor. We learn that the two have never actually met.
Yes.
And for some reason, Rex thinks that Sam is in the CIA. He's there to help out with his trouble with Hemlock. There's no explanation as to why he thinks this at this time. Later, it's referenced that Sam has written letters to his uncle Rex, lying about being in the CIA and a Navy SEAL for some reason. I didn't understand any of this. If you've never met your uncle, why are you writing him letters? But Rob, I love Jeffrey Lewis. I don't think I've ever not liked a character that he's played. He does his best to save this character. There's a hilarious joke where his timing and delivery is just perfect. He keeps forgetting Dave's name, and at one point, Haim says to him, "The name's Dave, bub." And Rex Carver immediately shoots back with a curious, "Dave, bub?"
Dave, bub.
I mean, maybe one of the laugh-out-loud moments of the movie for me. Just a completely stupid joke, but I love the way Jeffrey Lewis delivered it.
Well, I do have to say, too, that one of the henchmen, I believe, is Tony Longo, who is a sort of classic 80s movie henchman, does, he always finds a way to make me chuckle because, he's this gigantic human being, but often comes across childlike. And he had a couple moments where I cracked a smile at things he was doing.
So Rex reveals why he's asked Sam and Dave to the resort to dive for actual treasure located somewhere around the island so he can pay his debt. The diving scene, and I put that in quotes, is Haim and Feldman pantomiming swimming on a stage filled with sand and cardboard sea foliage with bubbles being blown around.
I mean, probably a wise place to cut budget as actual diving scenes would have been quite expensive, but boy, it's cheesy.
Things get uncomfortable when we visit Hemlock's lair to find him in front of a Nazi flag, and his henchwoman Alex Demetra Hampton asks him, how do you spell exterminate? This is one of the gags that every time we go back to Hemlock's lair, he's a different villain. But for a movie that has broken every filmmaking rule and been nothing but cheese, this is an oddly serious and disturbing turn. Hemlock has a Hitler mustache, a Nazi armband. Alex is wearing Nazi regalia. The shtick, is that he's a different type of movie villain, I guess. But boy, once he was wearing a Freddy Krueger glove and awkwardly had somebody chained up, a woman. So also a little disturbing. But this Nazi stuff was a bit much for me. Rob, what'd you make of the decision here?
Doing the Nazi thing, okay, I get it. He's super evil, but throw that
in a silly
turd
comedy
icing on that was
all right,
unnecessary.
So Hemlock sends Alex to seduce Sam to convince him to have Rex sign over the property to Hemlock for pennies on the dollar. So the Rex Carver character, he just kind of sits around in his office at the resort watching his old movies. Earlier I mentioned it seemed like he had dementia. In the next scene, he's almost living out his old movies, thinking that he's the actual Captain Morgan. Sam and Dave pretend to be characters from one of the Captain Morgan movies to trick him into signing the terrible deal with Hemlock. And Hemlock, who's now a mad scientist the next time we see him, reveals his plans to turn Treasure Island into a toxic manufacturing wasteland. And he had a little model and everything. I liked that bit as well. But when he stiffs Alex, who's never, or at this point I guess is revealed to be an actress playing the role of a seductress, she turns on him and helps Sam, Dave, Sonia, and Rex. She tells the gang that there's a buyback clause in the contract, but it's to pay off the entire $3.5 million debt owed to the bank. Rex, who's still thinking he's Captain Morgan, mind you, says he knows how to find the buried treasure and sends the group off with a map to find it. And Hemlock and his henchmen are following them, and they all meet up with an old hermit who serves as kind of a gatekeeper of sorts on the island, allowing only those deemed worthy to pass. And she does this by hosting a game show called 3 Tests of Valor. And the hermit is Zelda Rubinstein, who we mentioned earlier, of Poltergeist fame, and she is fantastic.
Just hamming it up. Such a weird, unexpected cameo appearance. I just how did this come together was going through my mind.
Right. The tests are physical, mental, and spirituality, which for some reason is, how do we put this? The hermit measures the endowment of all the guys.
Yes. And then we get, of course, our black joke thrown in.
Flash, the Jamaican bus driver on Rex's team, wins, and the hermit reveals that the treasure is on the beach.
Well, and then, sorry, just to swing back, like as they're following this treasure map, each location they are pointed to is like alive. You know, there's a rock that speaks to them.
Yes,
there's
the talking rock.
A palm tree that, you know, shakes and makes strange noises. Just such a collection of non sequitur oddities in this film.
So Hemlock then shoots the hermit and takes the group hostage, forcing them to the beach to dig up the treasure. But Rex shows up and challenges Hemlock to a duel. Everybody breaks out into sword fights. And then finally, mercifully, Sam and Dave help Rex defeat Hemlock and open the treasure, which is, surprise, it's a twist, it's film canisters containing the only film that Hemlock has ever starred in as the hero.
And he had thought all copies were lost.
Hemlock agrees to pay the mortgage in exchange for the film. Sam and Dave both agree to stay on the island working at the resort. The movie ends with a song from Led Zeppelin, an amazing band that does reggae covers of Led Zeppelin songs, but with an Elvis impersonator as the lead singer. The band is performing here at the end in the same faux underwater set that Sam and Dave were diving for the treasure earlier in the film, and we get a few cut-ins establishing the romantic relationships of Sam and Alex, Sonia and Dave, and then for some reason Rex and a mermaid. And then for good measure, of course, a quick Michael Jackson dance sequence from Corey Feldman, because at this point no movie is complete with him without it. Whew. Rob, thoughts on how Last Resort wrapped up?
Well, I do have to say I appreciated them opening the treasure to the lost films. I didn't expect it to take that sort of route with the film, and it was a quote unquote good ending for what we got. But yeah, then the Led Zeppelin, I was confused. I said, "Are these guys a real band? What's happening right now?" And yeah, I saw that they were, and I said, "What's with the Elvis dude?"
Yep.
I just very confusing, but I mean the song was
God,
fairly catchy,
it's great.
and yeah, and then just the odd clips at the end, and I was, strangely enough, I was waiting for the Michael Jackson dance the entire movie, and I was like, there it is. Yeah, I wonder if, like, contractually, does he get that written in, or is he just like, at some point, like, hey guys, turn on the cameras, film me doing this, and we got to fit this in somewhere. Like, how does that all operate? And I'm not sure. Like, I didn't sort of dive enough into the two Coreys' history to see where along the lines this fell relative to their issues with addiction and this whole Michael Jackson fetishism, and to see, in that spectrum, is this like early on with some of that stuff, or because it seemed to me that Corey Haim seemed out of it a lot in the movie. Mm-hmm. But again, I don't know where this all falls on that.
And what did you make of Led Zeppelin? I loved their Last Resort song.
Well, the weird part is, in listening to it, it seemed familiar to me, and I know I haven't seen the movie because there was no scene that rang a bell to me, unless at some point during Up All Night I turned it on and this movie was ending. Well, hold on, we got to circle back to what you opened with. Christopher Nolan connection?
I'll get there.
Okay.
I'll get there.
I thought you were starting to wrap us up here.
Yeah, I'll get there. Well, you now know what we think of this strange little film, but what are others saying? Or are they saying anything? Rob, no big surprise here that there is not a critic score for this movie on Rotten Tomatoes, but it does surprisingly have more than 2,500 audience scores.
Whoa.
Now, for a film that is just a tiny blip on the map, that number shocked me. But, Rob, did the score shock me? as we do each and every episode, I'll ask you, from 1 to 100, what do you think the audience score is for National Lampoon's Last Resort on Rotten Tomatoes?
1 to 100, I'm going to go 30.
So somehow the score for this episode's movie comes in just below last show's movie, Stuck on You, which was 33%. Rob, you hit the nail on the head. Last Resort has a 30% fresh score on Rotten Tomatoes. Now, here are a few reviews of the film. Super reviewer Philip H. gives it 1 out of 5 stars and writes, "Total and utter dribble from start to finish. I had no idea what was going on or why. It's a complete waste of time and money, and I have no idea why they even made it. Maybe to boost the two Corys' popularity and film CVs. Haha, trash."
Okay.
So, ouch. William S. gives it even less, just a half star, and writes, "Gave it a chance because it was National Lampoon, but it's just another in the long line of two Corys' list of bombs." Ooh, ouch. Now, the funny thing here is that only a couple of people who took time to write a review left their names. Most of them are just unnamed reviews. So we'll have to move on to unnamed reviewer number 1, who gives it 2 stars, writing, "Okay, this Cory movie, ... not so great. One would figure, ... There's a lot of ellipses in this one. Haim, Feldman, National Lampoon, beautiful women, winner, right? One would be wrong. This is no blown away. Flush this one. 1 star per Cory." So I like the creative 1 star per Cory there, but I also love that they're using Blown Away as a litmus test here for good movies. And then unnamed reviewer number 2 also gives it 2 out of 5 stars, writing, "I actually like this two Corys movie in a it's bad, so bad it's good way. The movie's inventive way of dealing with obvious budget constraints, such as cardboard palm trees, manages to give it a surrealistic feel that can only be achieved through true ineptitude or bad drugs or both. Plus, the theme song by Dred Zeppelin is damn catchy. I'd love an MP3 of it." Well, unnamed reviewer number 2, we've got you covered. We'll actually play Dred Zeppelin's Last Resort for you at the end of the episode. And since we're almost to the end of the episode, Rob, I have to ask you now. You've watched the movie, I'm sorry. We've heard some pretty harsh reviews about it, but what do you think? Is National Lampoon's Last Resort worth staying up all night for?
For me, it was not. If you are the two Corys completionist, you've got to check it out. Because I did feel at times that there was some sort of connection to Dream a Little Dream in just some of the weirdness involved, although it has been a really long time since I've seen that movie. But so if you want to complete that odyssey of all their films, check it out. I think Maureen's a highlight of the film. Just sort of, it felt like she was like a beacon of light in this bad film. Like all her scenes, she's so bubbly and fun, and many times appeared to be out acting everyone around her. I did not enjoy my time with it, but if you've got to see them all, then you've got to see it.
Rob, I do think it's worth staying up all night for, but only because it's such a weird movie. I mean, this is the bearded lady at the carnival, okay? It is so bizarre. Not quite a train wreck, but I mean, dropping the two Corys and some veterans like Jeffrey Lewis in the middle of this National Lampoon farce of a movie is just such an oddity. I mean, it's almost like we're watching Christopher Nolan's Memento, like the movie with the narrative told out of order. Only this movie is in order, and yet you're still constantly trying to figure out what's happening. So such a strange little movie, especially in the middle of the two Corys library.
Felt like the sort of the scatter shot approach of let's try every form of comedy we can think of and throw a joke in that style.
Okay, Rob, we did it. We made it through Last Resort. Probably the last time either of us will ever watch this movie.
Yes, definitely.
So it is a merciful goodbye from both of us. That's going to do it for this episode of Still Up All Night. You can find us all, as always, on Facebook and Twitter at Still Up Podcast. We'll leave you with Dred Zeppelin's Last Resort. We'll see you next episode.
Oh, there's a place you can go where the people say, oh, just a little south of Miami. Kick off your blue suede shoes and put your feet in the sand. And rock around the clock to a reggae band. Oh, where can I go? I said, oh, I'm living on the land. Since I met you, baby, I found a new place to play. I'm living on the land. Oh, with my last resort vacation, I'm living on the land. Become my heartbreak hotel. With the purple umbrella to hide from the sun, and the 50-cent hat with bright cummerbund, and the native girls do the buckle of the dance. I know this could be my last chance. Where can I go? The bellboy's always crying. The desk clerk wears passe and sweat. We're my last resort vacation. Become my heartbreak hotel. I knew that it was love when I met you. And now I lay awake thinking all night. Let me be your teddy bear. You can make me almost anywhere.
Oh, ring-a-ling-a-ling, dance all and swing. Some of the girls are dancing on the reggae party. Ting-a-ling-a-ling, school bell a ring. DJs at the station spinning about everything. Tune the rock, say the rhythm and blues. Some of the people say that you know you can't lose. Yeah, man.
How could I know? Oh. I'm living on the land. 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 Oh, let the sun down upon my face. I'm living on the land. And looking swell.